Poem from Greece, from the Cyclades, from the island of Kea. Moving over millennia. My feet move over millennia of men's sandaled footsteps on these dromas, rising and falling with the terrain just as they rose and fell on cool marble underfoot, walking under hours of sun, over marble and dry earth scattered with acorn shells, between stone-stacked walls and olive groves, through curtains of cicadas, wind, breath, sometimes with glimpses of celadon and cerulean, oases of sea. My feet move with mindfulness over their millennia. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to show 106 in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the uppermost coast of old Connecticut, and a different outside soundscape here, a bit more civilization aside from the welcome evening bird song. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. In broadcast 105, our theme was the gentle, gentleness from gestures to the weather, our words and sensitivity for others, to dimensions of nature, nurture, and culture. This week, we're walking through the world, literally and figuratively, wending our way through landscapes of all kinds, ones made by nature, ones made by man, landscapes and lifescapes, walking for the joy of it, for the discovery of it, wandering, roving, taking or making paths, being footloose, leaving footprints in the world, and more. I've chosen varied commentary, poetry, inquiry, and discovery, as always, and for this time together, I felt you'd find worthwhile. Well, let's begin by being barefoot and carefree. This is a poem from the old Dodge Estate in Madison, New Jersey, July of 2018. It's called The Bee Sting. On the instep, a small price to pay for the joy of walking barefoot through the meadow of summer clover, under the simple wonder of large white clouds, a large blue sky, without thoughts or cares, tasting only the sweet air of being here. The Bee Sting. And here's a poem I was inspired to compose on the spot as I took in a painting, a landscape painting at an exhibition of a friend of mine, a painter friend, Adam Van Doren. And the painting was called Lake District in England. Well, I entered the scene and I imagined having this experience in it, and maybe such a thing has happened to you. This is called On a Deep Green Rise. You hike with long legs up to a deep green rise, shirt unbuttoned to the sun, sleeves rolled, and stop to drink in the serene blue lake, bathe in the lather of the country clouds, long, soft, gentle clouds, their undersides still warm from the day. You lie down, face, chest, palms to the sky. Let all the elements converge. Well, how could we lead in without tipping a hat to the walker extraordinaire, Henry David Thoreau, and his treatise Walking from 1861 on the spirit of sauntering, the art of walking. He felt every walk was a sort of crusade. Those were his words. And the Marginalian tells us that he penned it 7 years after he wrote Walden, and sets out to remind us in it of how that primal act of mobility connects us with our essential wildness, that spring of spiritual vitality methodically dried up by our sedentary civilization. He said in there, I have met with but 1 or 2 persons in the course of my life who understood the art of walking, that is, of taking walks, who had a genius, so to speak, for sauntering, which word is beautifully derived, quote, from idle people who roved about the country in the Middle Ages. Well, he's careful to point out that the walking he extols has nothing to do with transportational utility or physical exercise. Rather, it is a spiritual endeavor undertaken for its own sake. He says, when we walk, we naturally go to the fields and woods. What would become of us if we walked only in a garden or a mall? Interesting, he wrote about malls, but those are different kinds of malls than we're thinking of today. Give me a wildness whose glance no civilization can endure, as if we lived on the marrow of kudus devoured raw. Life consists with wildness. The most alive is the wildest. All good things are wild and free. And he said, one other point, I'm alarmed when it happens that I've walked a mile into the woods bodily without getting there in spirit. In my afternoon walk, I would fain forget all my morning occupations and my obligations to society, but it sometimes happens that I cannot easily shake off the village. The thought of some work will ruin or will run in my head, and I am not where my body is. I am out of my senses. In my walks, I would fain return to my senses. What business have I in the woods if I am thinking of something out of the woods? Thank you, Thoreau. Well, many of us have favorite nature walks, I imagine. I certainly do. That we still may take or did take or touchstone back to, feel back to the essence of that place and time and experience. I walked often in this particular old reservation when I was spending time in New Jersey, in Convent Station. This is the Lawantaka Brook Reservation. The poem's called Lawantaka. The place of cold winter, the long-gone natives called it. Once a place of hunting for the Lenape, refuge for revolutionary soldiers, now an oasis for birders and walkers like me, disappearing under green canopies, reappearing past thin, rustling walls of reeds, to the still and moving pond where a blue heron stilts about for supper. A white swan idles elegantly, nonchalantly. Dozens of swifts air dance after insects only they can see, and red-winged blackbirds, sergeant major, yes sirly, round the perimeter. Though I am the only visitor this sunset hour, far from winters and wars, cities, and cacophonies. Lawantaka. William Stafford's poem Walking West, from his collection The Way It Is. Anyone with quiet pace who walks a gray road in the west may hear a badger underground, where in deep flint another time is caught by flint and held forever. The quiet pace of God stops still. Anyone who listens walks on time that dogs him single file to mountains that are far from people, the face of the land gone gray like flint. Badgers dig their little lives there, quiet pace, the land lies gaunt. The railroad dies by a yellow depot. Town falls away toward a muddy creek. Badger gray the sod goes under a river of wind. A hawk on a stick. Thank you, William Stafford. Well, every place, natural or man-made, offers up treasures for the senses, outer and inner, when they're wide open, when we're wide open, like this walk of mine, perhaps back in the summer's end of 2017 in Brooklyn, when I was doing a poet in residency there. Dutch farmers called it a kobbelsill, this conical place, whose cobblestones you walk and ride over, were right ballast for 18th century ships sailing over the wild, wind-swept ocean, whose plots of earth you pass, where jasmine, roses, and morning glories bloom and perfume, were hearts of farms for Dutch tillers, farmers in 1640 days, and then foundations for the fine, high houses of prospering merchants, ship owners, sea captains, watch-fobbed bankers. This cobbled place, gentling through generations of pre- and post-revolutionary times, of pluperfect and now leafily present times. Dutch farmers called it kobbelsill. Then there's the German philosopher Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, who actually wrote a whole philosophy of walking. That's the title of it. And in his 33rd year in the Black Forest, from the Black Forest, he wrote these words: "I'm walking a lot through the forest and having tremendous conversations with myself." When one has walked a long way to reach the turning in the path that discloses an anticipated view, and that view appears, there is always a vibration of the landscape. It is repeated in the walker's body, the harmony of the two presences, like two strings in tune, each feeding off the vibration of the other, is like an endless relaunch. Thank you, Nietzsche. Very interesting. Well, I was musing as I gathered material for us on different types of walkers, especially the most colorful ones back in time, like Boulevardiers. And this is from publicpeople.org. What is a Boulevardier? Of course, other than the cocktail, some of you may know, it's named after. It's in the strictest definition it comes from the French for boulevard or street, and it's a man usually who promenades through the fashionable city streets of Paris. Today, although the word is not a commonly used one, it could be best described as a, quote, man about town. In other words, the boulevardier is the urbane, fashionable city dweller of usually the upper classes, who has knowledge of any city, and particularly the cultured amusements to be found in that city. Well, that for some reason made me think of lots of different things, including flaneurs, which we'll talk about in a moment, but I came to mind of a limerick that I had forgotten I had written for a friend back in New York City of the time, Jane McCarroll, from my life then. And maybe she's a kind of female boulevardier. I don't know if that would be boulevardier, maybe. But it's a limerick for her. With the world at her feet. There's a young New York lady named Janie who's beautiful, sexy, and brainy. When she walks down the street, all the world's at her feet, whether it's sunny or rainy. So I send that out to her. Who knows? She might even be listening in. You never know exactly. I know some people are listening in, but I'm not sure if she is. But I'll let her know. Consider the simple adventures you can have, we can have, walking anywhere and in different weathers, and just even out in the rain. Well, here's a piece on that score from March of 2005 from Manhattan. Under the umbrella's furrowed brow, the world is all bottom halves, passing torsos and legs, hands holding leashes attached to dogs, hips, skirts chasing the wind in wisps of paper, waists and belts, trench coat buttons, tree trunks and white walls. fenders shining with rain, feet shod and sliding by every which way, pavement passing under one black cloud, and a feeling that the only world that exists or can be experienced begins and ends at the edges of your umbrella, a kind of peripheral parasol vision which feels circumscribed at first, then sheltered and comforting under the umbrella. Well, this next poem actually references that in a couple of different languages, the words for taking a constitutional. This is from Berlin, from March of 2015, strolling down the Kurfürstendamm and taking it all in slowly and delightfully. It's called Sunday on the Kudamm. As you Spaziergang, promenade, passeggiata in the mild and fashionable air along the Kurfürstendamm, before Café und Küchen, you have the watchers and the watchees, are yourself one or the other, or both, and relish the benign voyeuring, the kulturing, the local kulturing. Sunday on the Kudamm, if you've been to Berlin and the Kurfürstendamm, and you would know what that's like, or maybe you'll wind up there at some point. And talking about voyeuring as we walk about, we can also observe walkers and gather or wonder things about them. Give it a try. It can be great fun. I did this one day. I did it often, but I did it one day on Park Avenue and 68th Street in New York City. One lovely, mild December day. It's called The Man in the Patent Leather Pumps. He soft shoes down Park Avenue in black patent leather pumps, Belgian loafering, probably to Christmas lunch at the club, surprisingly yet bon vivantly sockless at 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Upper East Side height, smiles heading south to the woman, also smiling, slightly blushing, heading north, who wishes him, casts him a good holiday line, this Dudley Haverford the Fifth or Sixth or someone akin, who feels outwardly elite, blonde and blue-eyed in his skin, as he jaunts patently along his well-trod path in the top-hatted and spatted footsteps of his self-rarefied and equally self-satisfied forebears. And I came across Nikki Giovanni's poem, actually, walking down Park Avenue. Walking down Park, Amsterdam, or Columbus, do you ever stop to think what it looked like before it was an avenue? Did you ever stop to think what you walked before you rode subways to the stock exchange? We can't be on the stock exchange. We are the stock exchanged. Did you ever maybe wonder what grass was like before they rolled it into a ball and called it Central Park, where syphilitic dogs and their two-legged tubercular masters fertilize the corners and sidewalks? Ever want to know what would happen if your life could be fertilized by a love thought from a loved one who loves you? Ever look south on a clear day and not see Times Squares, but see tall birch trees with sycamores touching hands, and see gazelles running playfully after the lions, and ever hear the antelope bark from the third-floor apartment? Did you ever sit down and wonder about what freedom's freedom would bring? It's so easy to be free. You start by loving yourself. Then those who look like you, all else will come naturally. Ever wonder why so much asphalt was laid in so little space? Probably so we would forget the Iroquois, Algonquin, and Mohicans who could caress the earth. Ever think what Harlem would be like if our herbs and roots and elephant ears grew sending a cacophony of sound to us? The parrot parroting black is beautiful, owls sending out whoos making love, and me and you just sitting in the sun trying to find a way to get a banana tree from one of the monkeys, koala bears in the trees laughing at our listlessness. Ever think it's possible for us to be happy? It was fun. Thank you, Nikki Giovanni. So, flaneurs, well, Lauren Elkin, Elkin, has a book, Flaneuse. Women walk the city in Paris, New York, Tokyo, Venice, and London. It's a celebration of the peripatetic foot as an instrument of the mind, an insurgency, a liberation, drawing on the novels and diaries of titanic writers like Virginia Woolf and George Sand, who wove walking into their lives and works as a central theme of empowerment and active curiosity, and on her own diaries and memories as an expatriate in Paris and Tokyo, a traveler in Venice and London, a student in New York. This is from the review from the Marginalian. And so here's one slice of that. Walking is mapping with your feet. It helps you piece a city together, connecting up neighborhoods that might otherwise have remained discrete entities, different planets bound to each other, sustained yet remote. I like seeing how, in fact, they blend into one another. I like noticing the boundaries between them. Walking helps me feel at home. There's a small pleasure in seeing how well I've come to know the city through my wanderings on foot, crossing through different neighborhoods of the city. Some I used to know quite well, others I may not have seen in a while, like getting reacquainted with someone I once met at a party. Thank you, Laura Elkin. It's a fun book. Have a peek. Well, I love flaneuring, no surprise, and have done it all about the world for decades, and know a few great flaneurs in my circle, including my longtime artist friend, Richard Cale. And back on his 80th birthday in 2016, I wrote this for him apropos. It's called Our Flaneur, and it starts with a quote from Baudelaire, Charles Baudelaire. For the perfect flaneur, the original spectator, it is an immense joy to set up house in the midst of the fugitive and the innocent. He's essential to any portrait or panorama of the boulevards, arcades, parks, cafes of Paris, Rome, Buenos Aires, Seattle. Our singular urbane explorer, connoisseur of the greater and lesser cosmos, with his innocently roving, ravishing eye and imagination. Our graceful visual gastronome, faithfully poetic observer of unseen wonders, carried off-piste on currents of curiosity wherever they may flow, at any given hour or day, or change of inner or outer tide or weather. Our cartographer of the exceptionally ephemeral, indelibly yet inevitably fleeting scenes, signs, configurations, sometimes transfigurations, seeing and stepping with deep delight, his and ours, through the ever-turning, ever-tilting lens of his kaleidoscopic vision. Well, I encourage you to do some flaneuring of your own, whenever you can, wherever you are. And maybe we dial back. What if we dial back a bit to memories, distant memories of walks, including regular ones we did in our childhood, your childhood? This is Walking to School, 1964. David Willian, Wojahn. Blurring the window, the snowflakes, numb white lanterns. She's brewed her coffee, in the bathroom, sprays cologne and sets her lipstick upright on the sink. The door ajar, I glimpse the yellow slip, the rose-colored birthmark on her shoulder. Then she's dressed, the pillbox hat and ersatz fur. And I'm dressed too, mummified in stocking cap and scarves. And I walk her to the bus stop, where she'll leave me for my own walk to school, where she'll board the bus that zigzags to St. Paul. As I watch her at the window, the paperback romance already open on her lap, the bus laboring off into snow, her goodbye kiss still startling my cheek with lipstick trace. Thank you, David Willian. Denise Lowe has this poem, Walking with My Delaware Grandfather, and think, shall we, of those elders you may have walked with once upon a time, and the energy of that, the preciousness perhaps. Walking home, I feel a presence following and realize he is always there, that native man with coal black hair who is my grandfather. In my first memories, he is present, mostly wordless, resident in the house where I was born. My mother shows him the cleft in my chin, identical to his. I am swaddled and blinking in the kitchen light, so we are introduced. We never part. Sometimes I forget he lodges in my house still, the bone house where my heart beats. I carry his mother's framework, a sturdy structure. I learn his birthright. I hear his mother's teachings through what my mother said of her. She kept a pot of stew on the stove all day for anyone to eat. She never went to church but said you could be a good person anyway. She fed hobos during the 30s, her back porch a regular stopover. Every person has rights, no matter what color. Be respectful. This son of hers, my grandfather, still walks the streets with me. Some twist of blood and heat still spark across the time bridge. Here, listen. Air draws through these lungs made from his. His blood still pulses through this hand. Thank you, Denise Lowe. Lovely. How to Master the Ancient Art of Walking Meditation in Modern Life. This is a field guide from the pioneering Buddhist teacher Sylvia Boorstein. Well, I'll just give you 2 small slices. You might want to read more about her or it. When you walk at a strolling pace, the view is panoramic and descriptive. When you're walking slows, the view is more localized and subjective. Slow is not better than fast. It's just different. Everything changes regardless of pace, and direct first-hand experience of temporality can happen while you are strolling just as much as while you are stepping deliberately and slowly. The speed limit guide for mindful walking is to select the speed at which you are most likely to maintain attention, shift up or down as necessary. Thank you, Sylvia Boorstein. And all right, a few questions. You probably imagined, some of you, that I was going to get to some questions for you. You may have already been pondering all sorts of things, but right now, there's a few things I'm curious about, including the most delightful or memorable walk you ever had, whether it was solo or was with another or others. What and where was it? And what made it so meaningful? Is there a walk that you've dreamt of taking somewhere? Would be excited to go on, maybe in a place far away, like the Cinque Terre in Italy. Maybe you've already walked there or would like to walk there, or someplace like that. That's where the villages of Riamaggiore, Manarolo, Coniglia, Verazza, and Monterosso, the so-called 5 lands, are linked by a gentle lyrical coastal path and cascade down into the blue, blue sea. Yeah, the Cinque Terre. That's a lovely walk, lovely hike. And what about the Inca Trail in Peru, to Machu Picchu? And it's a 3 to 4 day trek that starts from Cusco and brings you through sacred ancient sites, rocky paths, and imposing mountain passes. It's the same route the royal Incas used to take to weave through the Andean mountains. And White-Tip Mountains, cloud forests, the magic of all that. It's the most famous trek, certainly, I would say, as far as I know, in South America. So maybe you'd like to experience that if you haven't. Those cliffs, those cloud forests, ruins, and enchantments. And when you walk, are you more in your head? Are you focused on your thoughts, or more or mostly in your body, consciously and fully sensing what's at play around you? And what do you love most about walking? Curious. I also wanted to speak of the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrimage in Spain, the walk that many people have taken for a very, very long time. I have a friend who's there right now, Pam Madigan, I think, just landing there today, actually, to do this. It's also known as the Way of St. James. It's a pilgrimage of medieval origin to the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela in Galicia, in the northwest of Spain. And it's been listed certainly as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its role in encouraging cultural exchanges. It's more than a pilgrimage. This is from CaminoWays.com. It says it's a unique experience and trip of a lifetime with routes attracting thousands of people all over the world. So something you might want to know about if you don't. And David White has done it, I think, done that walk solo, and I believe with his daughter one time. And he wrote a poem I've read many, many times, thought you would enjoy apropos. It's called Santiago. I'm going to just give you an excerpt of it. speaking of the literal and the metaphorical. The road seen, then not seen. The hillside hiding, then revealing the way you should take. The road dropping away from you as if leaving you to walk on thin air, then catching you, holding you up when you thought you would fall. And the way forward, always in the end, the way that you came, the way that you followed, the way that carried you into your future, that brought you to this place, no matter that it sometimes took your promise from you, no matter that it always had to break your heart along the way. The sense of having walked from far inside yourself out into the revelation, to have risked yourself for something that seemed to stand both inside you and far beyond you, that called you back in the end to the only road you could follow, walking as you did in your rags of love, and speaking in the voice that by night became a prayer for safe arrival. Thank you, David White, and maybe use that as a musing point for the way you walk through life, through the world, or want to differently, if you do. And what about hikes and hiking, mild or more of more magnitude? Campbell McGrath's poem, Releasing the Sherpas. The last two Sherpas were the strongest, faithful companions, their faces wind-peeled, streaked with soot and glacier light on the snowfield below the summit where we stopped to rest. The first was my body, snug in its cap of lynx fur, smelling of yak butter and fine mineral dirt, agile, impetuous, broad-shouldered, alive to the frozen bite of oxygen in the larynx. The second was my intellect, dour and thirsty, furrowing its fox-like brow, my calculating brain searching for some cairn or chasm to explain my decision to send them back without me. Looking down from the next axe-cleft serac, I saw them turn and dwindle and felt unafraid, blind as a diamond, sun-pure and rarefied. Whatever I was then, there was no turning back. Releasing the Sherpas by Campbell McGrath. Thank you. J.W. Rivers hiking with the old acorn lady. She knows the green cavern through which we walk from Springer Mountain to the Caribou Loam of Maine. She sees rocks release ancient reserves of moonlight and bathes herself in the glow, hears frogs pray for rain, sees beans and squash in bloom where I see only straw. A smell of mushrooms is in her clothes. She hears the beating of wings, voices from water and ferns. Put all that you are, she says, into the least thing you do. All that has been and all that has been said still reaches us if we watch the trail and listen to the trees. Squirrels chatter in ancient languages. A moon can rise from behind a flower. You will capture the wind with your hair, the sun with your eyes, and balance your burden so it is light. I hear leaves around us reciting prayers as her breath grows cold and shrinks to the length of her thumb. Indians come out of shadows to seal her eyes with cobwebs, sprinkle her lips with pollen. She slips by the sad eyes of my dog as leaves whisper her passing. Soon she will arise, bringing her whole life with her. Thank you, J.W. Rivers. I had a deeply enchanting, deeply refreshing bodily experience speaking of the land, the landscape, the forest, and moss. I was thinking of back in July of 2009, I was in the Inside Passage of Southeast Alaska, hiking through East Brother Island. And this is called moss dancing. We use the moss as stepping stones in the old-growth forest, then bare our feet to slow dance with more feeling on the yielding green cushions, pillows, and mattresses that caress our souls with silently primal softness, coolness. Moss dancing. thought we should contemplate together how walking at night takes on and offers out so many other qualities and experiences. This is Stuart Beck. Night walk. A light beneath the pavement slaps against your soles. In each doorway a cat preaches sleep. Despite the same scuffed moon, bolted at each corner to a listing pole, every intersection offers a fresh start. Side streets tunnel toward dead ends where trash fires gutter like candles, and wind beats like hovering wings above the watery halos of streetlights. Perhaps an angel of mercy presides tonight, guarding the cross streets, guiding the choices we make with each heartbeat. Yet when mercy is required, isn't it already too late? Remember, one shoe must step before the other. The first rule on city nights is still keep moving. Thank you, Stuart. Beck. David Wagner's poem, Walking at Night. After the sidewalk, after the last streetlight, at the end of concrete crumbling into thickening weeds, I begin shuffling slowly off balance, my shadow's feet gone slipshod under mine as it stretches further and further into the night, now spindly, fading to nothing as quickly as I darken. I move, my legs more lost than in a swamp, going blind among the dead calm branches of a bush that knows where its thorns belong, blundering, star-nosed as a mole through rubble, slanting and slumping, shortcutting myself. For no good reason, the last light shines where I abandoned it. No wings, no antenna, no burning catch-all eyes, no echoes whistling back from the shapes out of my reach, no starlight, scratching a line of march over the smudged heavens, nothing but streaks of cloud being rushed blue-gray as steel across the slam vault of the sky, a moonless coffer, where the only guides are the heart in my mouth, my body's guesswork, and sticks crackling under my feet as if in a dark fire. Thank you, David Wagner. I have one more worth sharing by Nikki Giovanni, because let us not forget to praise all our limbs, especially the legs and feet that carry us along through our days and travels and traversing's, including our steps through time and history. The Song of the Feet. It is appropriate that I sing the Song of the Feet. The weight of the body and what the body chooses to bear fall on me. I trampled the American wilderness, forged frontier trails, outran the mob in Tulsa, got caught in Philadelphia, and am still unreparated. I soldiered on in Korea, jungled through Vietnam, sweated out Desert Storm, caved my way through Afghanistan, tunneled the World Trade Center, and on the worst day of my life, walked behind JFK, shouldered MLK, stood embracing Sister Betty. I wiggle my toes in the sands of time, trusting the touch that controls my motion, basking in the warmth of the embrace day's end offers with warm, salty water. It is appropriate I sing the praise of the feet. I am a black woman. Thank you. Thank you, Nikki Giovanni. Julie McLean's poem, Footfall. I used to live on the chalk where clay gives way to the Roman road en route to an Iron Age fort. Laid a bivy bag off the track, squinting into the night bling from meteors and space junk. Hiked for days, dodging sarn and tor. Woke to dew on blade of plantain, shoved aside by the nose of a blind mole. Once I flew a homemade kite with the boy who had the wrong smell. He tried to kiss me on Gallows Barrow. So how could I leave my homeland, webbed by common path and famine row where blackberries dared to bleed over my teeth, when I'd love nothing more than swinging over worn stiles, chasing primrose trails, wiping sap of bluebell from my sleeve? On the road my legs seem less reckless now, more tools of philosophy. And what of this is true? The boy, the kite, the blood of berry. How can I tell a simple lie that weaves the yarn of my country back into my story? The bit about philosophy. Thank you, Julie McLean. and calling you when stepping through a night and evening to be conscious of the planets, the stars, and maybe a floating moon. This was a poem one Thanksgiving night crossing Central Park. Just me and the moon. A walk together, this Thanksgiving night, east to west, after a familiar feast, across the entirely empty park, the green, now dark, bare heart of the city, the collar of my long coat turned up to the steep cold, only the sound of my footsteps and visible breath audible in the air. Just me, heading home, and the moon, the unblinking moon, silent and silver bright over my shoulder. Charles Simich's poem, Evening Walk. You give the appearance of listening to my thoughts, O trees. Bent over the road, I am walking on a late summer evening, when every one of you is a deep, steep staircase. The night is descending. The leaves, like my mother's lips, forever trembling, unable to decide, for there's a bit of wind, and it's like hearing voices, or a mouthful of muffled laughter, a huge dark mouth we can all fit in, suddenly covered by a hand. Everything quiet. Light of some other evening strolling ahead. Long ago evening of long dresses, pointy shoes, silver cigarette cases. Happy heart, what heavy steps you take as you hurry after them in the thickening shadows. The sky above still blue, the night birds like children who won't come to dinner. Lost children singing to themselves. Thank you, Charles Simich. Night at the Ocean. This is Donald Jenkins' poem, A Walk. To his mother, he wrote this. Ahead on the beach there were bonfires, and it was dark. But over the coast range, moonlight broke from the clouds. A distorted landscape, preternatural hills. Huge gullies headlong to the ocean. We walked out on the sand. The surf was bright. We stood for a while barefoot in the waves, the pale foam breaking over our feet. The breakers were close in and steady. Mother, I had come back, bearded, almost a stranger. Still, for your son, you were the unknown, lovely woman on the beach at dark. How like you the crescendos and strange diminutions of light. The goddess moon, changeful and always only half known. Your son, mother, is surely a stranger. We passed the fires, then, turning back, it was revelation to know your steps beside me. The beach was flooded now with light. Immense, the landscape of the coast range. The ocean was incredibly large. That night was yours. Thank you, Donald Jenkins. A beautiful poem. Beautiful. I did many new ones for me, and I hope for you tonight. So, coming to the last part of our time together, Kenneth Grahame, who you might know as wrote the great Wind in the Willows in 1908 children's novel. Well, he was a great proponent of walking as creative fuel. He said nature's particular gift to the walker is to set the mind jogging, to make it garrulous, exalted, a little mad maybe, certainly creative and suprasensitive. Love that. And Rebecca Solnit, one of my favorite books, Wonderlust, The History of Walking, or A History of Walking, how it vitalizes the meanderings of the mind. She said, I suspect that the mind, like the feet, works at about 3 miles an hour. If this is so, then modern life is moving faster than the speed of thought or thoughtfulness. Most of the time in this book, she says, walking is merely practical, the unconsidered locomotive means between two sites. To make it into an investigation, a ritual, a meditation, is a special subset of walking. Physiologically like and philosophically unlike the way the mail carrier brings the mail and the office worker reaches the train. Which is to say that the subject of walking is in some sense about how we invest universal acts with particular meanings, like eating or breathing. It can be invested with wildly different cultural meanings, from the erotic to the spiritual, from the revolutionary to the artistic. Here, this history begins to become part of the history of the imagination and the culture of what kind of pleasure, freedom, and meaning are pursued at different times by different kinds of walks and walkers. So I encourage you to have a look at her book sometime, Wonderlust. Well, my friends, we must, I think, make the most of any and every walk we take among everything else we get up to, however long or short or seemingly humble that may be. There's always something to appreciate or more to appreciate. This is a poem from Fire Island 1, October, Salt Air. Number 2, the air is infused with the essence of October, a crisp apple air taste, blending with bay and sea saltiness, the reds and yellows of low trees and vines interleaving as we walk from ferry to beach, over gray, weathered wood smoothed by seasons, passing a young angel on a bicycle and houses at rest for the winter, until we shuck off our shoes and socks and feel the cool sand underfoot. See the brilliantined expanse of Atlantic, freckled white with fishing boats of every size, bobbing for the running bluefish. Watch the surf casters lure and reel them in from shore, and the red-hatted lady and her retriever running, pole in hand, up the beach to where the swirling gulls mark the spot, as we marvel on the glories of the day. And remember, everywhere you go, bring your presence, bring your fullest presence. Leave an imprint of essence, of energy, wherever you go. I wrote this poem for friends here in Rhode Island, Peter and Rose, who could recognize my literal footprints on the beach. I always liked that. And then they would try and find where I was. But at least the footsteps were there for a while. This is called Poet of the High Arches, whose high-arched footsteps keener observers and fellow beachcombers can see in the sand, even now at the end of November, but whose footprints like Crusoe's disappear, whose high arches, exuberant archings, while the clouds and wintering loons float by, are soon and softly removed by the coming and going waves. Let's have one more toward the end here from David White, and back to that well-worn and world-drawing walk, the Camino de Santiago. This is Camino. The way forward, the way between things, the way already walked before you, the path disappearing and reappearing even as the ground gave way beneath you, the grief apparent only in the moment of forgetting, then the river, the mountain, the lifting song of the skylark, inviting you over the rain-filled pass when your legs had given up, and after, it would be dusk and the half-lit villages in evening light. Other people's homes glimpsed through lighted windows, and inside, other people's lives. Your own home you had left crowding your memory as you looked to see a child playing or a mother moving from one side of a room to another, your eyes wet with the keen, cold wind of Navarre. But your loss brought you here to walk under one name and one name only, and to find the guise under which all loss can live. Remember, you were given that name every day along the way. Remember, you were greeted as such, and you needed no other name. Other people seemed to know you even before you gave up being a shadow on the road and came into the light, even before you sat down with them, broke bread and drank wine, wiped the wind tears from your eyes. Pilgrim, they called you again. Pilgrim. Thank you, David White. Maybe we are all pilgrims of one kind or another, traveling our own particular byways, our own particular caminos, on our own seekings, our own life journeys. Galway Canal, the orangery. Thus we will walk on the ruins of a vast sky. The distant landscape will come into fullness, like a destiny in the vivid light. The long-sought, most beautiful country will lie out before us, land of the salamanders. Look, you will say, at that stone. Death is in it. Secret lamp it is, this that burns under our gestures. Thus we walk lighted. Thank you, Galway Canal. Freya Manfred, green pear tree in September. On a hill overlooking the Rock River, my father's pear tree shimmers in perfect peace. covered with hundreds of ripe pears, with pert tops, plump bottoms, and long curved leaves. Under the green-haloed tree rose up and sang hello. I had forgotten. He planted it 12 years ago when he was 73, so that in September he could stroll down with the sound of the crickets rising and falling around him and stand naked to the waist, slightly bent, sucking juice from a ripe pear. Thank you, Freya, Manfred. Auroras by Joanna Klink, K-L-I-N-K. It began in a foyer of evenings. The evenings left traces of glass in the trees, a book and a footpath we followed under throat pipes of birds. We moved through a room of leaves, thin streams of silver buried under our eyes, a field of white clover buried under our eyes, or a river we stopped at to watch the wind cross it, recross it. Room into room you paused, where once on a stoop we leaned back, talking late into daylight. The morning trees shook off twilight, opening and closing our eyes, auroras. Beyond groves and flora, we followed a road dotted with polished brown bottles, scoured furrows, a wood emptied of trees. It was enough to hollow us out. The evenings left grasses half wild at our feet, branches with spaces for winds. The earth changes. The way we speak to each other has changed. As for a long while we stood in a hall full of exits, listening for a landscape beyond us. Thank you, Joanna Klink. Afternoon Walk, The Sea Ranch by Sandra Gilbert in memory of E.L.G. Late light, uneven mole-gnawed meadow, gullies fresh its falls, whose start and speckle Hopkins would have loved. And you too, who loved the sheen and shade, the forest dapple where grass meets cypress just beyond the house. You'd praise the mushroom sprout, the chilly glisten at the hedgerow folds into the solstice, and suddenly the last crisp leaves unfasten. This time of year, this place, light dims. At the pace of a long, late afternoon walk, light seems to slow in sorrow. As the meadow turns its face into your unlived season, the winter hollow where only a steep sky in quarter inches adjusts descending sun, ascending branches. Thank you, Senator Kim. Thank you. And next to last for now, an old Navajo prayer. As I walk with beauty, as I walk, the universe is walking with me. In beauty it walks before me. In beauty it walks behind me. In beauty it walks below me. In beauty it walks above me. Beauty is on every side. As I walk with beauty. And to close this walking through the world a while together, and in celebration of spring that we're in here, and how we can bring springing to and from our beings with a spring in your step, and spring in each step, rising for days with the soles of your feet, the roots of your legs, your trunk, branching arms, twigging fingers, budding out toward the in-leaning sun through your face and eyes, especially the eyes that reveal the deeper nature of this blooming, this ready springing, the aliveness coming with such sureness into the body, refreshing the psyche, renewing, effervescing your spirits. Thank you again for leaning in, floating and feeling in, and for your appreciations of all kinds. If you'd like to offer a comment or a compliment or a question about this or another broadcast, I'd be glad to have it. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. And if you want to express your thanks with a contribution, bravo, as they help me keep going with these free-for-all weekly shows. You can contribute by Venmo to Fivefold at pipeline.com, Fivefold, or by PayPal, or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, and the Donate tab, or simply by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. Patrons desiring to host me as a working artist, a poet in residence on a given property for a given time, this summer, fall, or winter to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to you, reach out and we'll discuss the possibilities. I also welcome invitations to be a virtual artist in residence, a poetic presence for an online community. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online, on YouTube, on the Floating Poetry playlist. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, fellow striders, flaneurs, promenaders, rovers, here's to embracing the pleasures, wonders, and inspirations of walking about, walking with openness and great awareness through your land and lifescapes, through your days and places of all kinds, wherever possible, with a real spring in your step. Goodbye for now, in good spirits.